I talked to current and former Microsoft engineers about life at the company, and here's what I learned. Microsoft has changed a lot in the years since Satya Nadella took over as CEO, and so I discovered that a lot of my own ideas about the company were outdated, especially around the third point I'll present. One thing which I think is worth mentioning is that compared to all the other big tech companies that I've surveyed, I felt like Microsoft had the least cohesive culture. The company has been around for so long and they do so much, from Windows to Microsoft Surface to Azure to GitHub to the Office suite to even quantum computing. It's mind-boggling how much they do. And with more than 200,000 employees and thousands of offices worldwide, it's difficult to present a single unified culture. The first theme I heard was actually around this very idea of enormous scale. As an engineer at Microsoft, you get to tackle problems that very few other engineers tackle. Nick Constantino is a principal engineering manager at Microsoft, and here's what he said about that.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool things is like scale. It's mind-boggling. For example, like when I was on the deployment team, we're talking about deploying and this is just on the Office 365 side of things, hundreds of services. It's not like we have a couple of services to roll out. It's like hundreds, and it's not to a couple machines, it's hundreds of thousands of machines. It's not just in the United States, it's like across the planet. So like the scale is pretty crazy. The routing side of things, like we're talking about, like not exaggerating, like trillions of requests per day. It's not even Azure. Like I'm not talking about that side of the business. So the most fascinating part for me is just the scale, at least from the technology side of things, right? The scale is just hard to imagine.
But the flip side of scale at Microsoft is that there's also a lot of friction. Decisions get made a lot slower because there are so many teams and people involved. And both technically and organizationally, there are a lot more layers of indirection to get things done. You need permission from someone, there's a lot of layers of abstraction in the code, you need to get a lot of buy-in before you can actually ship something. Especially at lower levels, a lot of the engineers I talk to so that it can feel like you don't really work on much of anything at Microsoft. You spend a lot of your day in one narrow area doing the work around the work, things like documentation or code review or getting sign-offs from different people. And it can be hard to develop an end-to-end understanding of a system given how large the company is. The next topic I heard about repeatedly was around promotion and compensation. At Microsoft, there's a focus on level progression. Here's what Nick had to say about that.
I do find a lot of the time engineers, and I feel like rightfully so, are focused on their level progression a lot more in Microsoft. So there's a lot more curiosity around like, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And it's a lot more explicit because it is a big company. I think that's one of the big differences I see.
Juan was a level 62 mid-level engineer working in Seattle at Microsoft for about 5 years up until 2021 on Windows. And here's what he had to say about this. What he told me was, levels are weird, and compensation is not the best, even for top performers getting special stock awards. And this is backed up by the data. If you look at levels.fyi, you'll see that Microsoft can't compete with the top big tech companies when it comes to total compensation, generally offering 30 to 40% less. The third theme I heard is what surprised me in a really positive way about Microsoft. A bunch of people mentioned that Microsoft has a really good blameless culture when it comes to engineering. Going back to Juan, he said, the team was extremely supportive, with a strong focus on a blameless culture, at least at lower levels. In my team, it truly felt like a family, with teammates who were always there for each other. Another person told me that for the first time in his career, his manager at Microsoft cared about him as a person and not just an engineer who was going to crank out some code to achieve some team objective. This is a big contrast to the older Microsoft from the mid-2000s, which was actually very well known for having a brutal stack ranking system where some percentage of employees had to get the lowest rating and then get forced out of that team or the company. Finally, I want to talk about the people side of Microsoft, both on the top and bottom end of the spectrum. First, on the bottom end, relative to other companies, Microsoft is very slow to fire people. That means you have people who are clearly poor performers, and unfortunately, they stick around at the company and they bring down the morale of the manager, the team, and they cause more harm than good. Microsoft did do a round of layoffs in the market correction a year or two ago. But generally, they are much slower to do layoffs or to put people on a PIP compared to companies like Amazon or Meta. On the other end, at the top of the company, a common complaint I heard is that there's a lot of empire building that happens among the leadership team at Microsoft. I heard repeatedly that the senior management at Microsoft is more concerned with growing their fiefdom and getting more headcount, getting more responsibility, rather than actually trying to ship really compelling, amazing products. Unlike other consumer-facing companies like Apple or Meta, there's a lot more red tape at Microsoft, and it can feel like it's very slow to respond to changes in the industry and very slow to make quality of life improvements for developers or customers. If you look at the past 10 years, Microsoft has grown almost 10x, which is crazy because even back in 2014, 2015, Microsoft was already one of the biggest companies in the world, and now it's multiple trillions of dollars market cap. As someone who grew up reading Microsoft Encarta, their digital encyclopedia, and also playing Pac-Man on the Windows 95, I owe a lot of my entry into technology, into the huge, exciting world of software. I owe a lot of that to Microsoft, and I think the same can be said for millions of other people. There was a time in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, when I felt, and I think a lot of the industry felt like Microsoft had its best days behind it. And certainly, as I've documented in this video, working at Microsoft is not without its drawbacks, but it also has some really nice benefits. And with AI and a lot of the innovations across multiple product lines, it's really an exciting time for the company. If you've worked at Microsoft or if you work there now, let me know what I missed about the company. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.